August 2008, approximately 50 miles south of Anchorage, Alaska, in the Portage Glacier region, an area known for its stunning glaciers, crystal-clear lakes, and breathtaking mountain views, a favorite destination for tourists and adventure seekers. But that year, something had changed at Portage Glacier. Something had gone terribly wrong. Our story begins with three college friends, Mike Thornton, Sarah Chen, and David Rodriguez, recently graduated from UCLA, vibrant, adventurous young people full of life. As a graduation gift to themselves, they had planned a camping trip to Alaska. They wanted to see what they called the last frontier, to be immersed in the wilderness, away from technology, alone with nature. On August 17th, they flew into Anchorage. They rented an SUV, purchased fully equipped camping gear, and headed south along the Seward Highway. The weather was perfect. The sun was shining, the sky was clear. Alaska welcomed them in all its glory. The first night, they stayed at the official campground in Portage Valley. Everything was normal. They chatted with other campers, told stories around the fire, roasted marshmallows. A classic camping night. But that note Sarah wrote in her journal is noteworthy. I heard strange sounds at night, like someone was walking around the campground. Footsteps, but different, heavier, more irregular. I told Mike and he said he heard it too, but said it could be a bear. He's probably right. The next morning, August 18th, the trio decided to leave the official campground for a more wild experience. They consulted with a park ranger. The ranger suggested a more isolated area beyond the tourist trails at the end of the Byron Glacier Trail. But be careful, the ranger had said. There's no cell signal in that area. If something goes wrong, it could take hours for help to arrive. Stay away from bears, hang your food, and whatever you do, don't leave your tent at night. Around noon, they reached their destination. It was a magnificent spot, surrounded by a stream fed by glacial waters, mountains rising behind them, an endless forest ahead, the perfect campsite. They set up their tents, built a fire, and spent the rest of the day hiking. When evening came, the sky was painted with that famous Alaskan twilight. The sun was setting, but not quite setting, a kind of endless sunset. The atmosphere was both beautiful and equally unsettling. Around 10 p.m., they were sitting around the fire. Mike was playing guitar, Sarah was making hot chocolate. Mike was thinking about what the park ranger had said that morning. "Guys," Mike said, "did that park ranger seem strange to you too?" "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. The seriousness in his tone when he said, "Don't leave your tent at night," like he wasn't telling us something. David laughed. "You're overthinking it, man. He was talking about bears. Bears are active at night, that's all." "I don't know," Mike continued. There was something more, that look in his eyes. Sarah cut off the conversation. "Guys, shh. Did you hear that?" They all fell silent. A sound was coming from the forest, the sound of breaking branches, heavy footsteps. But the rhythm was inconsistent. To the right, then to the left, then to the right again. "Bear," David said, but there was hesitation in his voice. The sounds were getting closer. At the edge of where the firelight reached, in the darkness, they saw movement, a quick movement, human height, but on four legs? Or two? They couldn't tell. Mike quickly stood up, grabbing a fire poker. "Who's there?" he shouted. Silence. Then, a sound. Human-like, but not human. Something between a howl and a scream. High-pitched, long, agonizing. It lasted exactly 8 seconds. Then, silence. "What the hell was that?" Sarah screamed. "Inside," Mike said. "Right now. Into the tents." All three ran into their tents. Mike and David in one tent, Sarah in the other. They zipped up, turned on their flashlights. Their hearts were pounding wildly. "That wasn't a bear," David whispered. "I don't know what it was, but we're staying here until morning." Around 11 p.m., the sounds started again. This time coming from right outside the tent. Footsteps, heavy breathing, and those strange, distorted steps. 2 feet, then 4 feet, then 2 feet again. "Mike? David?" Sarah whispered from her tent. "Yes," Mike said quietly.
"There's something outside my tent, right next to me. It's touching the zipper." Mike and David froze. They didn't know what to do. "Don't move," Mike said. "Don't make a sound." But it was too late. Sarah's tent zipper began to open, slowly, inch by inch. Something from outside, a hand or a claw, was pulling the zipper down. Sarah screamed. Mike and David immediately burst from their tent, Mike with his flashlight, David with a large branch. They ran to Sarah's tent. But there was nothing. The zipper was completely open, but there was nothing in front of the tent. No footprints, no traces. Sarah was huddled in the corner of the tent, trembling. "Did you see it?" Mike asked. "Did you see anything?" "No," Sarah said, crying. "Just a shadow, a tall, thin shadow, and eyes, red eyes." They didn't sleep that night. All three stayed in Sarah's tent, back to back, keeping the fire alive, waiting for morning. The sounds continued throughout the night. Footsteps circling the tent. Those strange, human-like, but not human howls. And worst of all, whispers. Yes, whispers. Like a human voice, but incomprehensible. As if someone was trying to imitate their language, but couldn't quite manage it. Around 5 a.m., as dawn broke, the sound stopped. The forest fell silent. Birds began to sing, as if nothing had happened. With first light, they decided to pack up and leave. They systematically began taking down the tents. Just then, David noticed something. "Guys, look at this." Behind Sarah's tent, in the damp soil, there were tracks. But these weren't bear tracks. They were human footprints, but very large, at least size 15-16, and strangely deformed. The toes were very long, pointed. And these footprints weren't just around the tent. They led toward the forest, into the deep, dark forest. Mike took photos. We're showing this to the police. They packed their belongings and loaded the car. But just as they were about to get in, Sarah stopped. "Wait," she said. "There's no wind." "What?" David said. "There's no wind, but the trees are swaying." They looked. Sarah was right. Deep in the forest, the trees were swaying, as if something massive was passing between them. And then they saw it. Just for a second, maybe less, between two trees. Tall, very tall, at least 7-8 feet. Thin, skeletal body, long arms, and that face, that horrifying face. It looked human, but at the same time, not at all. Then it vanished, disappeared into the depths of the forest. They didn't speak. They got in the car and hit the gas. As they drove away from Portage Valley, they looked back through the rearview mirror. At the forest edge, that tall shadow was still watching them. When they returned to Anchorage, they went to the police. They told them what they saw, showed them the photos, but the police, they weren't very interested. Probably a bear. Shadows can be deceiving in the dark. But Mike, Sarah, and David knew what they had seen. And from that day on, none of them ever returned to Alaska. So what was at Portage Glacier that night? A bear? A wild animal? Or something else?
What do you think it could be? Please share your thoughts in the comments. The local Alaska natives, especially the Alutiiq people, have legends. They call it Kustaka, a creature that's half human, half otter, the guardian of forests and glaciers. And at night, it approaches campers. It mimics them. Then, it takes them away. They're never seen again. Since 2008, 12 people have disappeared in the Portage Glacier region. All were campers. All had stayed in isolated areas, and the last place all of them were seen was at the end of the Byron Glacier Trail. Did this story disturb you? Believe me, this is just the beginning. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. And write to me in the comments, have you ever experienced anything strange in Alaska? On the northwest coast of Alaska, facing the Bering Sea, there's a small town, Nome, population just around 3,500. The nearest city is 500 miles away. In winter, the sun appears for only 3 to 4 hours a day. In summer, it's the opposite. The sun never sets. These extreme conditions can affect people's minds. But what happened in Nome in 2005 was far too strange to be explained by simple seasonal depression. Our story begins with Dr. Jennifer Hayes, 34 years old, a brilliant psychologist. She had come to Nome from Anchorage as a volunteer to serve the local community. She settled in the town in October 2005. She opened a small clinic. Her goal was simple: to help with the psychological issues created by the harsh Alaska lifestyle. The first few months were normal: depression cases, alcohol addiction, relationship problems, standard cases. But in mid-November, a strange pattern emerged. The first patient was Rebecca Morrison, 28 years old, a housekeeper at a local hotel. When she came to the clinic, she was panicking, her hands trembling. "Dr. Hayes," Rebecca said, something is happening to me. I'm losing time." "What do you mean?" Dr. Hayes asked. "Last night, I went to bed at 10 p.m. I just woke up at 7 a.m., but I don't remember sleeping for 9 hours. No dreams, no movement, nothing. It's like someone pressed a button on a time machine." Dr. Hayes took notes. "It could be sleep apnea. We lose awareness during deep sleep stages." "No," Rebecca said. "This is different, and it's not just one night. For the last 2 weeks, every night. And this morning, when I woke up, my bed was dirty. Mud. My shoes were by the door, but they were wet inside. I went outside, but I don't remember." Dr. Hayes frowned. "It could be sleepwalking, but to be sure, you should see a sleep specialist." Rebecca laughed. But the next day, another patient came. Thomas Chen, 42 years old, a technician at the local electric company. Same story. Lost time, waking up with dirty clothes, remembering nothing. Within a week, 12 patients came to Dr. Hayes' clinic, all complaining about the same thing: lost time, unexplainable gaps in their memory after midnight. And the strangest part, all of them had traces of blood in their nose, ear, or mouth when they woke up in the morning. Dr. Hayes reported the situation to the local sheriff, Sheriff Dan Foster, a cop with 25 years of experience. But he had never seen anything like this. "Doctor," Sheriff Foster said, "this town has 3,500 people. If 12 people are showing the same symptoms, this isn't a coincidence. Something is happening." That night, November 19th, 2005, Sheriff Foster decided to go on night patrol. Dr. Hayes went with him. Maybe they could see one of her patients outside in a sleepwalking state. At 11 p.m., they began driving through the town streets. Nome at night was like a ghost town. The streets were empty. Only the howling wind and the distant sound of ocean waves could be heard. Around 1 a.m., at the north end of town, they noticed something strange. About 25 people silently, in single file, walking through the dark streets, all in pajamas or nightgowns, barefoot, in the freezing cold. "God!" whispered Dr. Hayes. "Those are some of my patients." Sheriff Foster stopped the vehicle, got out. "Hey, what are you people doing? You'll freeze!" But none of them answered. They continued moving forward with robotic movements. Their eyes were open, but empty, as if someone was controlling them. Dr. Hayes went to one of her patients, Rebecca. "Rebecca, can you hear me?" Rebecca didn't respond. She just kept walking. Sheriff Foster stepped in front of the group, blocking the path. "Stop, right now!" But they didn't stop. They tried to walk over him. The sheriff pushed them back, but it was as if they felt no pain. They mechanically continued to move forward. "Let's follow them," Dr. Hayes said. "Let's see where they're going." They slowly followed them by car. The group was moving out of town, north, toward the shore. 15 minutes later, they reached the beach, and there they stopped. 25 people, side by side, standing facing the ocean, motionless, silent. Only the wind and waves. Dr. Hayes got out of the car, slowly approached the group. "Rebecca? Thomas? Can you hear me?" There was no movement. Then they all turned their heads at the same time and looked at Dr. Hayes. But their eyes weren't normal. They were completely black. No pupils, just deep darkness. Dr. Hayes screamed, backed away. Sheriff Foster immediately ran to her side, drew his weapon. "Hands up! Right now!" But instead, the group turned in unison and began walking toward the ocean. They entered the water, the freezing, deadly cold water, and kept walking. "No!" Sheriff Foster shouted. He ran into the water, grabbed someone, pulled them back. Dr. Hayes grabbed another, but there were 20 people. 2 people couldn't stop them. Within minutes, they all disappeared into the depths of the ocean. The waves swallowed them. Sheriff Foster pulled out his radio, called for emergency help. Coast Guard, fire department, volunteer search teams came. They searched all night, but they couldn't find any of them. 23 people entered the ocean from Nome Beach that night. None returned. Not even their bodies were found. Dr. Hayes was in shock. How is this possible? Why? Why did they do this? The following days were a nightmare. The FBI came. An investigation began. Media swarmed the town. Headlines screamed, "Mass suicide in Nome." But no one knew the truth. Dr. Hayes conducted her own investigation. She studied the town's history and found a terrifying truth. Since the 1960s, every 8 to 10 years in Nome, the same event repeated. People disappeared. Always the same way. At night, they would go to the beach and walk into the ocean. And before those disappearances, they all complained about the same thing: lost time, bleeding noses, blank memory. An elderly man from the local Inuit tribe, Thomas A. Payok, wanted to meet with Dr. Hayes. "Doctor," the old man said, "there are things you don't know, things in Nome that shouldn't be. The ones who come at night, they take people, they take them away, and when people return, they're no longer themselves." "What do you mean?" Dr. Hayes asked. "Those who come from the sky, the lights. They come at night, take people, do things to them, and bring them back. But people don't remember, just lost time. And then one day, the signal comes and they all walk into the ocean." Dr. Hayes couldn't believe it. "You're talking about aliens?" The old man nodded. "Call it whatever you want, but they're real, and they chose Nome. We don't know why, but this town is special, and they come here." Dr. Hayes wrote a report, presented her findings to the FBI, but no one believed her. Traumatic stress disorder. The doctor has become a victim of her own imagination. In December, Dr. Hayes left Nome. She returned to Anchorage, but she could never forget that night, those empty black eyes, that robotic walk, and the 23 people walking into the ocean. In 2024, a documentary crew went to Nome to investigate the missing persons cases, and they found something. North of the beach, among the rocks, strange markings, circular patterns of scorched earth, traces consistent with radiation, and strangest of all, no animals lived in that area. No birds flew, as if nature had abandoned that place. What's happening in Nome? Is lost time real, or is it mass hysteria? What do you think about this? Don't hesitate to share your thoughts. The FBI closed the case as unsolved, but the locals know. Every night they look up at the sky, and sometimes they see lights. Strange flickering lights. And every 8 to 10 years, people continue to disappear. On the southeast coast of Alaska lies Yakutat Bay. Magnificent glaciers, lush green forests, and one of the world's best salmon fishing grounds. But in this paradise-like place, in 2012, a chain of unexplainable events began. And these events brought together scientists, military personnel, and paranormal researchers. Our story begins with Captain William Drake, 52 years old, an experienced fishing boat captain. He had been working in Alaskan waters for 30 years. He fished for salmon in Yakutat Bay with his boat, the Arctic Hunter. His crew consisted of 5 people: himself, first mate Joe Martinez, and 3 deckhands, Kevin Walsh, Danny Peterson, and young Tommy Chen. July 15, 2012, 4:30 a.m. The Arctic Hunter was 40 miles off the coast of Yakutat Bay. The sun hadn't risen yet, but in Alaska's summer months, the sky never goes completely dark. A twilight brightness prevailed. The crew was casting nets. Salmon season had begun, and the first day was usually the most productive. Everything was normal. The sea was calm, the weather clear, no other vessels on their radar. A perfect fishing day. At 5:15 a.m., Joe Martinez noticed something. An abnormal signal on their radar. But this wasn't a ship. It was too big. It covered almost half the radar screen. "Captain," Joe said, "take a look at this." Captain Drake looked at the radar screen. He frowned. "What is this? An iceberg?" "It's moving," Joe said. "Icebergs don't move this fast." They tracked the signal. It was coming toward them. Fast. Very fast. "Where?" Captain Drake asked. "Can you see it visually?" Joe grabbed the binoculars, looked at the horizon, and froze. "Captain, the water! The water is moving!" "What do you mean?" "The sea! It's rising! Like something is passing underneath!" Captain Drake ran outside, and he saw it. About 2 miles ahead in the bay, the water surface had bulged. A massive swelling, as if there was a submarine underneath, but much, much bigger. And it was coming toward them. "Start the engines!" Captain Drake shouted. "Now!" But it was too late. That massive bulge came under their vessel. The Arctic Hunter lifted up as if a giant hand was raising it into the air. For 15 seconds, the boat was 10 feet above the water, then dropped back down. Crash! The ship plunged into the water, then resurfaced. The crew had been thrown across the deck. Kevin had hit his head and was bleeding. Danny had fallen into the engine room, his ankle sprained. "What happened?" Tommy shouted. Captain Drake ran to the bridge, looked at the radar. The signal was still there, but now it hadn't moved on. It was directly beneath the ship, not moving. And then the sound began. First, a low-frequency hum, like a giant engine running. But this wasn't a mechanical sound. It was organic, alive, and it was getting louder. Blood began coming from the crew's ears. The sound was so intense, it caused physical pain. Tommy collapsed to the floor, trying to cover his ears. Danny was crying. Kevin had passed out. Captain Drake grabbed the radio, called the emergency frequency. "Mayday! Mayday! Arctic Hunter, Yakutat Bay, 58.4 north, 139.7 west. We're under attack by something unknown. Repeat, unknown attack." The radio cut out. All electronics shut down. Radar, GPS, radio, even emergency lights. Everything went offline. And the sound changed. It wasn't just a hum anymore. There were patterns in it, rhythms, like it was a language, communication. Joe Martinez opened his eyes, but his eyes weren't normal. His pupils had dilated as if he'd seen something. They're talking, he whispered. "Joe?" Captain Drake shook his friend. "Joe, look at me!" But Joe was somewhere else. I see them. They're beneath us. So big, so ancient, and they're calling us." "What are you saying?" Captain Drake slapped Joe. Joe came to himself, began crying. The sound continued for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Then it stopped. Sudden silence. The massive presence beneath the boat moved away. The radar signal slowly faded, descending into the depths. Electronics slowly came back online. First the emergency lights, then radar, then radio. Captain Drake immediately called the Coast Guard, reported the situation. The Coast Guard sent a rescue helicopter. 2 hours later, the Arctic Hunter was towed to port. The crew was taken to the hospital. All had damage to their eardrums. Tommy and Danny had temporary hearing loss. Kevin had a concussion. And Joe Martinez had psychological trauma. He was screaming like crazy. "They're coming back! They want us! They're going to take us!" Captain Drake wrote a report. The Coast Guard launched an investigation. But the official explanation? Probably underwater activity related to an earthquake. But no earthquake had been recorded in the Yakutat area that day. If the story ended here, it would remain just a strange maritime incident. But it didn't, because 3 days later, another ship in the same area experienced the same thing. Then, a week later, another. Then another. By the end of August, 11 different vessels had reported the same phenomenon in Yakutat Bay. Massive underwater masses, ear-shattering sounds, electronic failures. And each time, one of the crew members experienced psychological breakdown, saying, "They're calling us." The media learned of the situation. News was broadcast. And finally, military interest began. In September 2012, the U.S. Navy sent a submarine to Yakutat Bay, the USS Connecticut, a nuclear-powered attack submarine. Its mission? To find and identify that unknown underwater entity. On September 12, the USS Connecticut reached the bay. Sonar systems were activated. Deep-sea scanning began. The first 2 days they found nothing, but on the third day, September 14 evening, sonar detected something strange. At the deepest point of the bay, at 1,200 feet depth, a massive structure. But this wasn't a natural formation. It was geometric, symmetrical. Sonar operator, Lieutenant Sarah Park, reported, "Sir, this is a structure, man-made, or something made." The commander, Captain Robert Hayes, frowned. "What's its size?"
at least 400 feet long, 100 feet wide, and it's moving. Very slowly, but moving. "Approach," Captain Hayes said. "Get a visual." The submarine descended into the depths. 1,000 feet, 1,100 feet, 1,200 feet. The sonar signal was becoming clearer. And then they saw it. On the submarine's forward cameras, in the dark water, a massive shape appeared. At first, it looked like a rock formation. But as they got closer, no, this wasn't rock. The surface was rough but regular. There were patterns, geometric shapes, and the color? Dark green, almost black but glowing, bioluminescent. God, is this a ship? But this didn't resemble any known vessel. It didn't resemble human technology. Its shape was asymmetrical and organic, as if it had been grown. Not built, but grown. Captain Hayes took photos, recorded video. "Report to headquarters. We've found an unknown underwater structure, possibly of foreign origin." But he couldn't send the message, because at that moment, that structure awakened. Lights appeared on its surface. Hundreds, thousands of small lights. They formed patterns, moved in waves. And then the sound began. The same sound. The sound the fishing boats had heard. But this time it was more powerful. The submarine's hull began to vibrate. The crew covered their ears. Equipment began malfunctioning. "Pull back!" Captain Hayes shouted. "Now!" But the submarine didn't move. Engines weren't working. Electronics were offline. Only emergency systems were functioning. And that structure approached. Slowly, gradually, it moved toward the submarine, as if examining it. Sarah Park looked at her screen. "Sir, a section of the structure is opening." A fissure formed. On the side of the structure, a massive opening. And from inside, something emerged. At first, it looked like water. But it wasn't water. It was denser, alive. It moved, it thought, and it came toward the submarine. That thing touched the submarine's hull, and at that moment, in the crew's minds, sounds began. Not words, images, emotions, memories, but not their memories, someone else's memories. Memories of the deep oceans, dark, cold, silent. And there, in the darkness, civilizations living at the bottom of the ocean, never surfacing, never seeing the sun, living for millions of years, then forgotten. And then a message, clear, definite: leave. This is not yours. The sound stopped. The structure withdrew. Engines restarted. The submarine emergency surfaced. The crew was in shock. Some were crying. Some sat silently. Captain Hayes wrote a report, but what would he report? What would he say officially? The USS Connecticut left Yakutat. The case was classified as confidential. Nothing was told to the media, but some crew members talked on the internet, in forums, on social media, and the story spread. In 2013, an oceanography professor, Dr. Michael Torres, began his own investigation. He came to Yakutat Bay, took water samples, examined the seabed, and found something astonishing. At the deepest point of the bay, unusual chemical compositions, unknown proteins, DNA sequences, but DNA that didn't match any organism on Earth. Alien, or just undiscovered deep-sea life? Dr. Torres published papers, gave presentations at conferences, but the scientific community was skeptical. Insufficient evidence, they said. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But Dr. Torres didn't give up. In 2015, he returned to Yakutat again,
this time with more advanced equipment. Remotely operated underwater vehicles, ROVs, deep-sea cameras, acoustic sensors. June 23, 2015, 2 a.m. The ROV descended to 1,400 feet depth. Cameras were active, and they found it. On the seabed, covered in mud, a massive structure. But this time, it was buried, as if hiding. The ROV approached, touched the surface, and at that moment, all systems malfunctioned. ROV communication was lost. Screens on the ship went dark. Dr. Torres panicked. "Bring back the ROV." But the ROV didn't return. The cable had broken. $200,000 worth of equipment was lost in the depths. That night, Dr. Torres had nightmares. Dark oceans, giant eyes, and a voice. "Leave us. Go." The next morning, Dr. Torres terminated the project, packed his equipment, left Yakutat, and never returned again. In 2018, a documentary crew heard the story. They came to Yakutat, talked with local fishermen, and learned that the local Tlingit tribe has ancient legends. They call it Unexplained, the sea monster. But not just a monster, a protector, the guardian of the ocean. And according to legend, beneath Unexplained, at the bottom of the sea, there's a forgotten city. And in that city, someone still lives. The documentary crew published their research, but mainstream media wasn't interested. Just legends, they said. No scientific evidence. But those who live in Yakutat know. They still look at the bay at night, and sometimes lights rise from the deep waters. Green, flickering lights. And that hum, that ear-piercing, mind-drilling hum. And sometimes on the bay shore, early in the morning, people are found, having lost their memory. They don't remember the last 24 hours, and on their bodies, marks. Strange, circular burn marks, as if something had marked them. What's in the depths of Yakutat Bay? A forgotten civilization? An unknown life form? Or just natural phenomena? The truth is, nobody knows, because those who search for answers either disappear, flee in fear, or return with stories no one believes. In 2024, sea levels continue to rise. The climate is changing. Glaciers are melting. And scientists warn, 95% of our oceans remain unexplored. We don't know what's down there. Maybe there are things we shouldn't know. Maybe some secrets should stay buried. Tonight, I have shared with you Alaska's 3 darkest stories: the Kushtaka at Portage Glacier, the missing time in Nome, and the unknown in the depths of Yakutat Bay. Are these stories real? There's evidence, but it's not conclusive. There are witnesses, but some aren't credible. And maybe the truth isn't that important. Maybe what matters is this: there are still things in our world we can't explain. There are still mysteries. There are still dark corners. Alaska is one of those places. The last frontier. The last wild land. And there, perhaps, some things don't want humans to find them. If you ever go to Alaska, and I recommend you do, it's a magnificent place. But be careful. If you hear strange sounds in the forest at night, stay in your tent. If you experience missing time in Nome, leave immediately. And if you're fishing in Yakutat and you hear that deep hum, turn back immediately. Because some things shouldn't be discovered. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I love you all. See you in the next videos. Take care of yourselves.